Hey everyone, my name is Hakuna Matata and I play Catan. Today I'm going to be going through the Catan Championship Semifinal Premium Tournament number 13, where I took on three great opponents, Bucksas, Kuuchi, and Billy Destroy, who is actually DyLighted undercover. And I'm going to go through how I approached the game and how I ended up actually winning. So first off, we'll be looking at the initial placements of the board. The first look strategies that I have before I ever even do that first roll, and then just a few game moments that I wanted to highlight. And so first off with initial placements, I was placing first here. And this is, I thought, was a very difficult board actually to read, especially with the time limit given in columnist.io. And so a few spots that I had in mind were both 5-8-10s, the 6-9-5, and as well as the 6-9-3 over here. I think those were the four spots that I most considered. I ultimately went with the 5-8-10 in the top left, and this goes against what I normally do. I normally want to land on wheat because I think that's by far the most important resource in the game. And knowing that these 6-9, the two best wheat, are basically right next to each other, that was a little bit concerning for me because I wasn't sure if I was going to get locked out of it. But looking closer at it, I know that there's a lot of outs for me getting wheat, right? And so I wouldn't actually get locked out of it. I can see the 6-9-3 getting taken. I can see either the 10-9-11 or the 9-11-4 being taken. One of them gets taken. You got other spots here. Got the 9-3-4, the 9-2-10, and then the 11-10-3, 11-4-5. And then last but not least, you got this 9-10 over here at the 3-1 port. I think I definitely didn't want to have 11 wheat ever. I think that is by far too little. And so I think the lowest I ever go is 3 points of wheat, really. Obviously, depending on the board, but in most cases, 3 points is probably the lowest I'll go. And I know that no matter what, even if the craziest stuff happens, I'd have this 6-2 over here at the 3-1 port still available. And so that was kind of my mindset of getting the 5-8-10 without any wheat at all. And that's my way of kind of playing it safe, because I know I won't ever get locked out or stuck without anything besides possibly just brick, which I was okay with. And I think during the table talk, most people were thinking I would do the 5-9-4, but then you're kind of getting stuck with a terrible second position of wheat and wood, or possibly wheat and brick. And that's pretty much about it. Maybe wheat and sheep down here. And so I know that me missing wheat and brick, there's a lot of wheat and brick right next to each other. And so that's another thing I look at. I don't know if this placement is absolutely the right way to go as first position. I think every game is different. There's a lot of luck with it. And so this is not the definitive right answer, but I think it was a really safe choice for me to pick. Next here was DyLighted, and he went with the 8-5-10 down here, which I think is a good pick. I think as second position, it's either going to be the 8-5-10 or the 6-9-3 right here with the wheat. I think me personally as second position, I probably would have taken the 6-9-3 wheat. Here I can see DyLighted pointing up to try to get to the ore, which is fine, which is probably the best gamble to make. However, me as first position, he should see that that's a very viable option that I might have to take at the end of the game. If all the other wheat is taken, I'm definitely taking that 9-10 wheat. You know, add more ore, get me the wheat that I desperately need, and also get me 3-1 port. I think it's a really great position. And so that's the risk you kind of take. And after DyLighted placed here, he was definitely talking with the other two players. Are like, yeah, if you place on the 6-9-5, don't point your road down because I'll definitely be able to have better road materials and beat you to it. Basically just trying to make sure no one's racing him there. Meanwhile, I'm over here saying, trying to push for both of them to race for it. Meanwhile, knowing that I very well might take the 9-10 and block both of them, make them both waste a road, right? And so that's kind of the table talk that I'm kind of pushing at this moment. So now that DyLighted placed second, and he placed right there, I think without a doubt, Bucksas absolutely has to put place on the 6-9-3. I think that is probably the best place to be, especially since you have so much ore that you're definitely going to get on an ore pairing with it, no matter what. And so this puts Kuuchi actually in a very, very difficult position because there's so many different ways to go with it. Kuuchi ended up going to his settlements with the only goal of making sure that this 659 is not still available for Bucksas, because then it would just be a godly setup. Only missing sheep and being able to pair both your wheat and ore together is just extremely, extremely scary. And so what Kuuchi ended up doing was placing here first on the 843 and then followed by the 6115. And, this is a really tough decision for anyone that was placing fourth here, but I don't think I would have gone this way just because, like I said before, I hate the 11 wheat. I think that's far too little, especially when you have 10 points of ore right next to it. And, what's the ore without the wheat, right? And so I don't really like how balanced his setup is. At least he did block Bucksas from getting that one of these two great spots with the 6 or the 9. I think as fourth position, I probably would have taken the 659 and the 911-4, and possibly just let Bucksas take this 843 and get targeted quite a bit, and just let that happen. I think you'd be in a better position. Bucksas would be in a better position, but it would kind of be a duel between y'all two. So I'm not really sure. I think that's a really tough decision, but since Kuuchi placed that way, Bucksas had the decision to make of, do they place on this 6-9-12 or this 6-11-12? And I think that's a really tough decision as well. You get way more production at the 6-9-12. You get all your resources at the 6-11-12. But I think what ultimately made Bucksas pick this 6-11-12 was looking at where DyLighted was. And DyLighted needed ore. And he figured that if he placed on this 6-9-12, DyLighted could place on this 6-3-11, point up, get on the brick very quickly, probably still have this still open, and therefore be in just the best position compared to anybody now, all of a sudden. Because let's say DyLighted plays this 6-3-11, I'm probably playing the 9-11-4 instead. And I feel like I'm in a great setup. But at the end of the day, DyLighted would have access to ore. And so what ultimately happened was that because DyLighted couldn't get on this ore, besides being on a 9-12, which no one wants, he placed on the 9-11-4, which is my preferred spot, which made me place on the 9-10. And so that's how it ended up happening. When DyLighted was about to place, he really did consider placing somewhere else and leaving me this spot open just so he could make sure that he'd get on ore. But at this point, he has a great setup. And so despite not having a port, not having ore, he still has diverse and great numbers, and every other resource. So this was how the first placements went. I was actually pretty happy with how I was set up, just because I didn't think anyone else could compete with me for ore wheat sheep development cards. And so I thought I was in a good spot, and but we're going to go through everyone's spots next, right? Yep. And so basically what I think about before I even roll the dice is, what is everyone's game plan? What should I not be trading them? And who is the overall biggest threat that I should be always paying attention to? And so looking first at DyLighted, I think the one thing that he needs to do is find ore and try to get ore as fast as he can. Two ways of doing that for him would be obviously this tree port down here, and then buying development cards. Looking at that tree port, the pros are that it can be really sneaky whenever you're porting for wood. You can tend to get wood trades easier than getting like ore trades because people are scared of the city. However, it's probably the slowest thing that he could have done. He doesn't even have his first road pointing down there. He's only on a 5 wood to begin with. He would have to get there first and then get this 10 wood in order for it to be kind of a strong port setup. So it's not the most viable thing. Next, he could do development cards. The pros of development cards are, you get your plenty for the ore. You can get Monopoly, which on this particular board is crazy valuable because of how much ore there is. Because there's so much ore, there's going to be cities quickly, and those cities are more than likely going to be right back on the ore. And so there's going to be a lot of ore all at probably one time. And so monopolies are just absolutely killer. And then lastly, let's say he gets knights. DyLighted of all people is probably best at being able to barter and trade with any part of the game. So let's say he rolls a 7, he's talking to you about how he can get cards and not block you. And he's kind of doing that threatening of, I'm going to block you unless you trade me this or do this for me, And so getting more knights and having more control of the robber just kind of facilitates that part of his game that he's really, really great at. Advantages of DyLighted setup, like we said, diverse numbers, 4 out of the 5 resources. He also has longest road potential, best wood, best brick, only 3 roads away from his 2 settlements. So it's there. Disadvantages, of course, no ore, very poor ports. The only one he has is wood port, and he's not even facing towards it because of his first bad road. And he's also competing for his other 2 good expansion spots up here. Black might want to get that, blue might want to get that. So it's never an easy way of getting his next position. And so he's always going to be a tough decision of where he goes next, right? Looking next at Bucksas, I think the biggest thing here is he needs to protect himself, right? Those coordinated ore and wheat are just the scariest thing ever to most people. So he's going to want to be able to find as much sheep as possible in order to get development cards and make sure that the 6s are both unblocked at the same time. It's most important that they are open together because they work together with ore and wheat, right? And starting off, Bucksas placed here second. So he has 1 ore already. 2 6s in the game, that's a city already, right? And so just making sure that those are not blocked is extremely important to him finding success in this game. So advantages, again, the paired ore and wheat. He has no contention for his ports or expansion spots either, besides maybe this 10-9-2, which is not even a high priority of DyLighted, I'm sure. And then everything else, no one else is competing for him. So he's got a lot of space to work with and a lot of time to get there. Disadvantages are really besides the ore and wheat, everything else is very weak. You got wood and brick, although they're both the same amount of production points, they're pretty weak, only 2 points, and then the sheep is only 1 point. And so, however, in this game, 12s rolled pretty crazy and ended up being more like a 4, honestly. So, ended up working out, but apart from the ore and wheat, if ore's blocked, what's his game, right? And so that's a pretty big disadvantage. Next with Kuuchi and black, I think his number 1 goal is absolutely getting to the 3-for-1 port. He's going to have so much ore, he needs to port it and get rid of it and trade it for other things as fast as possible. And so, again, if he had more wheat, it'd be a completely different story. But the fact that he only has 2 points, that ore doesn't really do much. And so, me personally, if I was in Kuuchi's position, I think I do preference the 3-for-1 port over this great expansion spot. Just because I think you absolutely need it. If you don't have it, it's game over, basically. I think he caught a break with me actually getting this 3-for-1 already, so I wouldn't be racing him for it up there. Because, let's say I have this 9-11-4 instead, I'm going for that 3-for-1 first, right off the bat. And if Kuuchi doesn't have it, his game's over. There's nothing for him to really do at that point. So advantages, lots of ore, which is always great, He also has longest road potential, best wood, best brick, 3 roads apart, just like DyLighted. However, lost a lot of disadvantages of having weak wheat, absolutely needing the port, and he's competing with DyLighted for this expansion spot. And so, races are always risky and never the greatest thing. I try to avoid them as much as possible. So, lastly, really quickly, with kind of my setup, I feel like I definitely need to city up quickly and then just buy development cards. I'm the only one with strong ore wheat sheep across the board. And so I think I really should not have contention with it. However, that's not how the game turned out. But basically, that's just my game plan. Keep buying dev cards, keep that flow going, and trying to keep the robber off me. And so really just be willing to trade for both brick because I don't have it at all, and then wheat because it's a little weak. I'd like to have more wheat than that. Real quickly though, just looking at where I'd go first, I'd definitely go to the sheep port first. I know I might want to get more wheat down here just to even out everything, but I think ports are essential to this game, especially at the beginning, and getting them early, I mean at the beginning, to set up the whole rest of the game. So advantages, my ports are good because I already had 3 for 1 and I had the sheep thing and they're secured. And the disadvantages are that I have weak wheat, like I said, no brick at all, and I have very few expansion spots. So normally when I play or wheat sheep, because I don't have very many roads, you want to have a lot of one road settlement spots. Here, I really only have 2. I know black's going to be going for this 3 for 1. I probably won't get it. I prioritize other things for it anyway. And so being on the coast over here, I don't even have another one. So that's another thing that I was very worried about. And I think that was probably the biggest disadvantage I had with my setup. So lastly, overview. These are just the things that I'm running through my head before, well, while I'm playing. DyLighted. Do not trade that guy ore. Bucksas. Do not trade that guy sheep. Keep his 6 from hitting together, right? And then Kuuchi, don't help him get to that port quicker. Because once he gets to the port, that's when his game starts going. But overall, I think the biggest threat here off the bat was Bucksas. Just because he's 2 6s away from an early city. It's coordinated. It's pretty scary. Oops. And now just a few game moments that I want to look at. Very first roll of the game, I roll a 7. And so I'm deciding who I should block and who I should steal from. What I ultimately did was I blocked the 9 wheat. And I wasn't really sure if this is the right move either. The reason I did it was I really wanted to steal from DyLighted because he has 2 wheat and a brick, which are the resources that I would want here, right? I'd want either a brick to pair with whenever I got this wood just for a quick road to get to this port even quicker. And if I didn't get that, then I'd at least get a wheat. And if I get a wheat, I'd have 2 of them now. I'd be an 8 and a 9 or 2 8s or 2 9s away from a city very quickly. And so I think I absolutely had to steal from DyLighted here. Now, where do I block? I could have blocked anywhere that he's connected to. However, I know that Bucksas is also pretty scary. So I wanted to also block Bucksas. However, what does this really do? DyLighted has 5 points of wheat still. Bucksas has 5 points of wheat still. So is it the most damaging block? Probably not. But at the end of the day, I think it worked out. Actually, I don't think it mattered. I think a 7 was rolled maybe 2 turns later anyway. So that's ultimately what I did. Again, please, I'm open to the comments where you think probably the best block would be. So just saying Kuuchi had a ore, wheat, wood. Bucksas had wood, sheep, ore. And so that's what I ended up doing. Next, here's another moment that actually DyLighted did. It's pretty early in the game right now. As you can see, I'm actually at 6 points secretly. DyLighted is at 4, possibly 5, but ended up only being at 4 right here. And what he does here is he has enough to place 2 roads. And what he does is he places 2 roads between the 8 and 10, therefore keeping me from expanding any further. Now, within the context of the game, it took me a very, very long time to get this second road down right here. And so I don't think DyLighted was really that scared that I would be able to cut him off or steal that spot from him. And another thing to consider is if DyLighted had put the roads on this side of the 8, no one else had longest road yet. So he would have the 2 extra victory points and therefore have longest road at that time. I think, well, looking back now, it's 100% sure that DyLighted made the right move here because I got very fortunate with the number of rolls. My next turn, I was able to road settle. And so had he not done this, I would have been able to get on the 8 sheep for my sheep port and get on a wood port when I have a 10 wood going with the city on it. And so I think I would have absolutely been unstoppable at that point had he not put his roads like that. And so I think the lesson here is don't prioritize longest road when it's that early, especially since Kuuchi up above was 2 roads away from being at 6 and just taking it right then and there. And so I think being very patient with those victory points can also keep you from being a target early, since people might be thinking, oh wow, Billy's already at 7, with 6 and a hidden development card. So yeah. And then here is just the very end. This is the final score, a recap of the final, me being at 10, 7, 7, 6. Final board. What ended up happening was DyLighted was the one with the killer Monopoly. He monopolied, I think, like a 6 and an 8 or an 8 and a 9 hit back to back, and he just monopolied all the ore and was able to get 2 cities just like that. And so he was at 7 with a hidden development card, and his turn was coming up, and he by far could have taken, or very easily could have taken Rhodes on that turn. So I was afraid that he had won the game, and he was going to be at 10 just like that. Looking back now that we know that wasn't a victory point, he would have been at 9. Maybe would have been able to draw for the win, but I wasn't sure. I fortunately drew another victory point for the win. So within this game, I did maybe 5 or 6 different development cards and never got a single knight, which, I mean, I was very lucky to get 3 victory points, but also a little unlucky to not be able to protect myself during the game at all. But this is the very end of it. Again, I've only been playing Catan for, I first played it 5 months ago. I've only been recently consistently playing it for the past 2 months. And so, by all means, these are not the definitive right answers. Please comment below if other things you would have done, different places you would have settled, different tactics you might have used. And I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to keep learning about it. And I'll be trying to video record some of these games in the future and maybe post them on here. So any feedback is definitely encouraged. But thank you. Thanks for watching.